Hello friends, welcome back to Cosmopolitan Cornbread. So today we are going to do an unboxing video. I don't do these kinds of videos very often, but I do canning videos. And we are going to be opening my new steam canner. Now, I've had a steam canner for years, but when I saw that they had started making the stainless steel one, and they've made some minor modifications to the design, I decided to go ahead and get one. Now, there's nothing wrong with my aluminum one, but I thought it'd be nice to have a backup one. I'll just keep the aluminum one as the backup, and I'm going to start using this one. Now, if you're not familiar with steam canners, they are a high acid food canning device for processing your jars of foods. So your salsas, your fruits, your tomato sauce, anything that is acidic, jellies, jams, anything that you process in a hot water bath canner, you can process in the steam canner. Now, a steam canner does not hold as many jars as, say, a hot water bath canner. You can't double stack in a steam canner, but if you just have a smaller batch of something that you're canning, the steam canner works phenomenally. It heats up way quicker than a hot water bath canner, so it's going to use less energy. When you turn off the heat, when you're done processing your jars, it cools down very, very quickly. But additionally, it is lightweight. It's easy for somebody to use if you've got mobility issues, if you don't have a lot of upper body strength. You don't have to worry about a gigantic pot of water that you've somehow got to empty, after it eventually cools down, because it takes so long to heat up and cool down. It also heats up your kitchen much more. Because this only uses about 2.5 quarts of water, it doesn't heat up your kitchen quite as much as your hot water bath canner does. Now, because it only uses 2.5 quarts, you are limited on your processing time. You can process anything that is under 45 minutes. If you go over that, then you do have to use a hot water bath canner. Now, let me talk just a little bit more about the steam canner here, and after that I'm going to do the unboxing, and I'm going to show you what you need to do before you use your steam canner for the very first time. You have to do a test, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Now, this steam canner is good for any kind of stove. It's good for electric stoves, gas stoves like mine. You can use it on ceramic, and you can use it on induction stoves. Okay, so let's open this up. All right, so first of all, we've got our user manual, of course. We have our handle that goes on top of the dome, the lid, and the indicator that is in there. There is a gauge in there. All right, we have our rack. This is made out of aluminum, but the steam canner itself, this one, is made out of stainless steel. All right, so here is the dome lid, and then we have the base for the steam canner. And you can tell that this is much heavier than my aluminum one. Not just because it's stainless steel instead of aluminum, but the base, the bottom of the pot is kind of reinforced. That's a much heavier gauge bottom, and it's smooth, which is why you can use it on an induction stove. The steam canner one, there's a ridge, a texture on the bottom of that one. So this is a little bit of an improvement right there. So the base, and again, this holds about 2.5 quarts of water. Doesn't take much at all. Got the rack that goes in there, and then we need to put together our dome lid. So let's pull this out. All right, so you can see the knob right here has that gauge inside, and if you have seen my other steam canner gauge, I think I can find a clip of it and show you right here. That one has ranges for elevation, but this one is a little bit different where you have many more markings, many more different levels, almost like a speedometer. So you can maybe get a little bit more specific with this gauge. But additionally, one of the changes that they made is they included this little red indicator clip. You can snap it on and have it marking exactly where it is for your elevation, and go from there, so that way every time you can, when your needle gets up to that point, you know you're ready to start your timer. With my previous steam canner, my aluminum one, it did not have that. It just recommended that you take like a marker and mark it on there, but they've now included this little indicator clip. All right, so let me go grab a Phillips head screwdriver and we'll put this together. All right, so we're going to remove the screw on the bottom of the knob here. And we're going to put the bottom of the knob into the top of the flange here, just like that. So we're going to take the screw and the washer, put it through there. We're going to go through the inside of the dome right here, stick the screw through there, kind of hold it in place with your finger. Then we're going to take the flange piece, put that over the top. Whoop. We're going to take the knob, line it up with the hole right there, kind of center it on there. All right. All right, and then we are going to just take the screwdriver and we're going to tighten it up. All right, so now I'm going to go grab some canning jars so we can do the indicator test. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and add my water to the steam canner here. And again, this takes about 2.5 quarts of water. We're just going to pour that in. You don't have to measure it or anything. You just look at the water level, and when you see it coming up to where it's just barely touching underneath the rack here where the jars sit, then you know you got enough water. All right, there we go. The water is right there, just touching the underside of the rack. Now, in the back of the dome, right here, you can see that there is a little vent hole right there, and that goes on the back. Now, older models or cheaper models of steam canners like this have this little hole there in the vent, and the way you're supposed to know if you're up to temperature is by holding a thermometer in this hole and testing the temperature of the venting steam, and making sure it's the proper temperature. To me, that just sounds a little sketchy, so I personally wouldn't use a canner like that. You know, having the temperature indicator there in the knob, whether it's this one or the other style that's in the aluminum one, I just think is a much better option. All right, so we have the dome on, and I'm just going to go ahead and turn on the stove. All right. And we're just going to let this start heating up. Now, if you were actually canning something, making some jelly or some jam or canning maple syrup or something like that, it wouldn't take very long to heat up at all because you'd most likely already be warming up your jars in your canner. I usually have the water just kind of simmering, you know, warming up my jars so that when I put my hot things in, they're going into the hot jars. But because we're starting cold, it's just going to take a little bit longer, but it's still way less time than it would be if you were using a hot water bath canner, just because of the sheer volume of water that you have to use for that. Now, as it starts coming up to temperature, and it gets closer to the temperature that you need, you'll see steam coming out the back, that little vent hole, and you may see the dome starting to kind of jostle a little bit and steam kind of escaping around, or maybe it's spitting a little bit of water. When it does that, it's almost to temperature, but you want to go ahead and very slowly turn down the heat on your stove until it stops doing that. And then you'll watch your gauge, and when that red needle comes up and it stops and it doesn't move for 10 minutes, you know you have reached your full temperature for processing. And so that is when you take your little red indicator, if you have a steam canner that comes with it, and you'll just pop this on. If you don't have a steam canner that has one of these, then you would just take a permanent marker and just mark where the spot is. Or with this one, because you've got an entire range and each one of those little lines in that kind of sun ray design has a letter, you could also just remember what letter it was on, but the indicator will help. All right, so I'm going to sip my coffee and we'll let this heat up. All right, so as you can see, we've got a whole bunch of steam coming out back here, and my gauge has stopped moving. Now, if I was canning something, processing jars of food, when it gets to this point, this is where I would set my timer and I would start the processing time. And the processing time for a steam canner like this, again for your high acid foods, is exactly the same amount of time for your hot water bath canner. So it does not matter which kind of canner you're using, the processing time is the same. And so this is where I would set my timer and let it start processing. Now we can imagine that the timer went off, the processing is done. With a hot water bath canner, you would go ahead and remove the lid for your canner, and then you would let the jar sit for 5 minutes in the hot water before you remove them. The difference with the steam canner, because there's so little water in there, it's going to start cooling down much quicker. So instead, when the timer goes off, you turn off your stove and you wait 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, then after that, after your 5 minutes of resting time, that's when you're going to open this up, and you want to lift it and tilt it away from your face so that you don't burn yourself with the steam. Okay. So the dome has been removed. You can go ahead and take the jars out of the canner and transfer them to your canning mat. And by the way, you may notice my new canning mat. I have a sewing tutorial coming to show you how you can make one of these. And there you go. All right, I've got my little indicator on there, and I moved it to the spot that is where the high point was for when I had the water boiling and doing the indicator test. So now I'm just going to make sure that every time I'm using this for processing, then it's going to come up to that point, and that's when I'll start my timer every time. Now, I had someone ask me a really good question a while back about doing this test, if it's something that you need to do on a regular basis to make sure the gauge is still accurate. You could definitely do it. As you saw, it only took a few minutes. Just go ahead and do this test every time canning season starts. Or if you can all year long, just remember, okay, I bought my canner in, say, June, and every June maybe do this just to make sure it is still accurate. There's nothing in the manual about doing repeated tests, but it certainly wouldn't hurt anything. All right, so there you go, friends. That is not only how to do your temperature indicator test. What you got in your pocket? Oh, you got some coins? Okay. Now, if you're not already signed up for my free email newsletter, be sure to sign up at the link in the video description down below, where you can get my free ebook all about using a steam canner, as well as some of my favorite canning recipes. I love you. Mwah. Thank you for joining me here again at the homestead. God bless, and I'll talk to y'all next time. You say bye-bye?